In the ever-turbulent world of the young and the restless, few rivalries burn as fiercely or as relentlessly as the decades-long war between Jack Abbott and Victor Newman. And just when Genoa City thought it had seen every possible twist in their bitter feud, Jack unveiled a shocking new strategy that sent tremors through every boardroom, mansion, and back-alley deal in town. He was recruiting Tucker McCall as his ultimate weapon. It began quietly, almost invisibly, with Jack retreating into a rare period of silence after Victor's latest crushing victory, a calculated corporate strike that left Jabbo reeling and Jack publicly humiliated. But beneath that calm exterior, Jack was anything but defeated. Instead, he was calculating, watching, waiting for the precise moment to strike back in a way Victor would never see coming. Jack knew that going head-to-head with Victor using traditional tactics was futile. Victor thrived in predictable wars, where power, money, and intimidation ruled. To defeat a titan like Victor, Jack needed chaos, unpredictability, and someone who understood how to dismantle empires from within. That someone was Tucker McCall, a man whose reputation for cunning, manipulation, and ruthless ambition rivaled even Victor's own. Their meeting was nothing short of electric, a clandestine encounter far from prying eyes, where two brilliant yet dangerous minds sized each other up, each aware that an alliance between them could either reshape Genoa City or destroy them both. Tucker, never one to align himself without personal gain, was initially skeptical, questioning Jack's motives and probing for weakness. But Jack came prepared, laying out a meticulous plan that targeted not just Victor's businesses, but his legacy, his family, and the very foundation of his empire. He spoke of fractures within Newman Enterprises, of simmering tensions among Victor's inner circle, and of opportunities to exploit those cracks with surgical precision. Tucker listened, intrigued, as Jack revealed layers of strategy that went far beyond a simple corporate takeover. This was psychological warfare, a campaign designed to isolate Victor, turn his allies against him, and leave him vulnerable in ways he had never experienced before. For Tucker, the allure was irresistible. The chance to outmaneuver Victor Newman was a prize few could even dream of, let alone attempt. As their alliance solidified, the balance of power in Genoa City began to shift in subtle yet unmistakable ways. Deals that once seemed secure suddenly unraveled. Loyalists within Victor's ranks began to question their positions, and whispers of a looming upheaval spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Victor, ever the vigilant patriarch, sensed that something was amiss. He couldn't yet see the full picture, but he recognized the signs of an impending storm, unusual market movements, unexpected betrayals, and the faint but unmistakable scent of Jack Abbott's involvement. What Victor didn't realize, however, was that this time, Jack wasn't acting alone. Tucker's influence added an entirely new dimension to the conflict, introducing variables that even Victor's formidable instincts struggled to anticipate. As the plan unfolded, Jack and Tucker executed a series of calculated maneuvers that struck at the heart of Victor's empire. Strategic acquisitions, covert alliances, and carefully orchestrated leaks began to erode the stability of Newman Enterprises, creating a domino effect that threatened to bring the entire empire crashing down. But this was no simple battle of business tactics. It was a deeply personal war, fueled by years of resentment, betrayal, and a relentless desire for dominance. Jack saw this as his chance to finally emerge from Victor's shadow, to prove that he was not just a rival, but a superior force capable of rewriting the rules of the game. Tucker, on the other hand, relished the chaos, thriving in the uncertainty and using it to further his own ambitions, even as he remained outwardly committed to Jack's cause. Yet, as with any alliance built on ambition and mutual benefit, cracks began to form beneath the surface. Trust was a fragile commodity between two men like Jack and Tucker, and both were acutely aware that betrayal was not just possible, but inevitable. Each move they made was shadowed by the question of who would ultimately outmaneuver whom, and whether their partnership would survive long enough to achieve its ultimate goal. Meanwhile, Victor, refusing to be cornered, began to fight back with a ferocity that reminded everyone why he had remained untouchable for so long. He launched counterattacks that were as swift as they were devastating, targeting Jack's vulnerabilities and attempting to expose Tucker's true intentions. The resulting clash was nothing short of explosive, a high-stakes battle that pushed every character involved to their limits and threatened to reshape the entire landscape of Genoa City. In the midst of this chaos, loyalties were tested, secrets were revealed, and the line between ally and enemy became increasingly blurred. Jack found himself walking a dangerous tightrope, balancing his desire for victory against the growing realization that partnering with Tucker might come at a cost he wasn't prepared to pay. Tucker, ever the wild card, continued to play his own game, leaving both Jack and Victor guessing as to his true endgame. And Victor, the master strategist, remained as formidable as ever, refusing to yield even as the walls closed in around him. As the fallout intensified, one question loomed larger than ever. Was Victor Newman finally facing defeat, or was this just another chapter in his long history of turning the tables on those who dared to challenge him? The answer remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Jack Abbott's decision to recruit Tucker McCall had ignited a chain reaction that would have consequences far beyond anything anyone in Genoa City could have anticipated, setting the stage for a showdown that would redefine power, loyalty, and ambition in ways that would echo for years to come. As the shockwaves of Jack Abbott's bold alliance with Tucker McCall continued to ripple through Genoa City, the fragile equilibrium that had long defined the rivalry between Jack and Victor Newman began to fracture in ways no one could fully predict. What started as a calculated, almost clinical strategy quickly evolved into something far more volatile, a psychological chess match layered with deception, manipulation, and deeply personal vendettas. Jack, who had once been driven primarily by a desire to protect Jabot and uphold his family legacy, now found himself consumed by a darker ambition, not just to defeat Victor, but to dismantle him piece by piece, stripping away the myth of invincibility that had shielded Victor for decades. Tucker, meanwhile, thrived in the unfolding chaos. Unlike Jack, whose motivations were rooted in years of rivalry and emotional scars, Tucker approached the situation with a cold, almost detached pragmatism. To him, Victor Newman was not a lifelong adversary, but a formidable obstacle, one that, if removed, would open doors to unprecedented power and influence. Yet even as Tucker played his role as Jack's ally, there were moments when his true intentions flickered just beneath the surface. He asked questions that seemed innocuous, but hinted at deeper calculations, probed weaknesses in Jack's plan, and occasionally suggested alternatives that subtly shifted the balance of control in his favor. Jack noticed, of course. He would have been a fool not to. But for now, he chose to tolerate it, convincing himself that managing Tucker's unpredictability was a necessary risk in the pursuit of a greater victory. The first major strike against Victor's empire came not with a dramatic announcement, but with a quiet, almost invisible maneuver that sent shockwaves through the financial world. A series of strategic acquisitions, companies that had long been considered loyal extensions of Newman Enterprises, were suddenly pulled out from under Victor's control. On paper, the transactions appeared legitimate, even routine. But the speed and coordination with which they occurred suggested something far more deliberate. Behind the scenes, it was Tucker's network that made it possible, leveraging connections and exploiting vulnerabilities that Victor had either overlooked or underestimated. Jack, watching it all unfold, felt a surge of vindication. For the first time in years, Victor was on the defensive. But Victor Newman was not a man who stayed cornered for long. When the reports reached him, he didn't react with panic or outrage. Instead, he grew very still, a dangerous stillness that those who knew him well recognized as the precursor to a calculated counterattack. He retreated into his office, reviewing every detail, every transaction, every name involved. And as the pieces began to fall into place, a single, undeniable conclusion emerged. This was Jack's doing. But there was something different this time, something unfamiliar in the pattern. Jack alone wouldn't have the reach or the ruthlessness required to orchestrate such a precise strike. Which meant there was someone else involved, someone who understood the game at Victor's level. It didn't take long for Victor to identify the missing piece. Tucker McCall. The realization brought a flicker of something rare across Victor's expression, not fear, but recognition. Tucker was not just another rival. He was a wild card, a man who played by his own rules and answered to no one. An alliance between Jack and Tucker was not just dangerous, it was unpredictable. And unpredictability was the one variable Victor could never fully control. Meanwhile, the effects of Jack and Tucker's campaign began to spread beyond the corporate world, seeping into the personal lives of those closest to the conflict. At Genoa, tensions ran high as executives struggled to keep up with the rapid changes. Some were exhilarated by the aggressive strategy, seeing it as a long-overdue assertion of dominance. Others were uneasy, sensing that the company was venturing into dangerous territory. Whispers of concern circulated through the halls, questions about whether Jack's partnership with Tucker might ultimately do more harm than good. Jack himself tried to maintain an air of confidence, but the pressure was mounting. Every decision carried higher stakes than the last, every move opening the door to potential retaliation. And yet, despite the risks, he couldn't deny the thrill of it, the sense that he was finally gaining the upper hand, finally stepping out of Victor's shadow. It was intoxicating, and perhaps that was the most dangerous part of all. Tucker, ever observant, noticed the shift in Jack's demeanor. He saw the way Jack lingered over victories, the subtle change in his tone when discussing Victor, the growing intensity in his eyes. It was a familiar pattern, one Tucker had seen before in others, and even in himself. Power had a way of amplifying ambition, of turning calculated risks into reckless gambles. And while Tucker had no intention of abandoning the alliance just yet, he began to quietly prepare for the possibility that Jack might become as much of a liability as Victor. Victor's counterattack, when it came, was swift and devastating. Rather than directly confronting Jack and Tucker, he chose a more insidious approach, targeting the very foundation of their alliance. Through a series of carefully orchestrated leaks, he began to sow doubt and mistrust between them. Confidential information, details of past deals, hidden clauses, and undisclosed contingencies somehow found its way into Jack's hands, raising uncomfortable questions about Tucker's true intentions. At the same time, Tucker received his own set of revelations, suggesting that Jack had been quietly positioning himself to take full control once Victor was out of the picture. The effect was immediate and profound. Conversations between Jack and Tucker grew more guarded, their once fluid collaboration now marked by hesitation and suspicion. Every proposal was scrutinized, every agreement double-checked. The easy rapport they had initially established began to erode, replaced by a cautious, almost adversarial dynamic. And Victor watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. Yet, even as the cracks in their alliance deepened, Jack and Tucker continued to press forward, each unwilling to abandon the campaign just yet. There was too much at stake, too much already invested. But beneath the surface, the question loomed larger with each passing day. Who would make the first move? Who would betray whom? The answer came in the form of a high-stakes deal that had the potential to tip the balance of power. A major acquisition, one that would grant control over a critical sector of the market, was suddenly within reach. Both Jack and Tucker recognized its importance, and both understood that securing it would require absolute trust and coordination. But trust, by this point, was in short supply. As negotiations began, tensions reached a boiling point. Jack pushed for a straightforward approach, emphasizing speed and decisiveness. Tucker, on the other hand, advocated for a more nuanced strategy, one that involved layers of contingency and strategic misdirection. Their disagreements, once manageable, now threatened to derail the entire operation. And in the shadows, Victor Newman prepared to strike once more, ready to exploit whatever weaknesses emerged. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only determine the fate of Victor's empire, but also the future of Jack and Tucker's uneasy alliance. In a world where power was everything and loyalty was a luxury few could afford, one truth had become impossible to ignore. In their quest to bring down Victor Newman, Jack Abbott and Tucker McCall might very well destroy each other first. The tension surrounding the acquisition deal reached a fever pitch as Jack Abbott and Tucker McCall found themselves standing on the edge of a moment that could either cement their dominance or shatter their alliance beyond repair. What had once been a daring, almost exhilarating partnership had transformed into a delicate balancing act where every word carried weight and every glance concealed layers of calculation. And looming over it all, like a storm ready to break, was Victor Newman, watching, waiting, and preparing to turn their ambitions against them. Jack could feel it, the shift in the air, the subtle but undeniable sense that something was slipping out of his control. He had always prided himself on his instincts, on his ability to read people and anticipate their moves. But Tucker was different. Tucker didn't follow patterns, he created them. And now, as they stood on the brink of their biggest play yet, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Tucker was already several steps ahead, quietly rewriting the rules of their engagement. The deal itself was a masterpiece of strategic opportunity, a powerful conglomerate with ties to multiple industries, including several that formed the backbone of Newman Enterprises. Securing it wouldn't just weaken Victor's empire, it would destabilize it from within, cutting off key resources and forcing him into a defensive posture he had spent decades avoiding. For Jack, it was the culmination of everything he had been working toward, a chance to finally deliver a blow that Victor couldn't simply brush aside. But for Tucker, the deal represented something more complex. It wasn't just about defeating Victor, it was about positioning himself at the center of a new power structure. And as negotiations progressed, it became increasingly clear that Tucker's vision of that structure didn't necessarily include Jack as an equal partner. The first real fracture appeared during a late-night strategy session, where what should have been a routine discussion quickly escalated into a tense standoff. Jack presented a streamlined approach: move fast, secure the deal, and consolidate control before Victor could respond. Tucker listened, his expression unreadable, before calmly dismantling the plan point by point. He argued that speed, in this case, was a liability, that Victor would be expecting exactly that kind of aggressive move. Instead, Tucker proposed a layered strategy, one that involved deliberately leaking false information, creating the illusion of internal conflict, and luring Victor into a counterattack that would ultimately backfire. Jack didn't like it. Not because it lacked merit, but because it required a level of trust he was no longer sure he could afford. Tucker's plan depended on misdirection, on making even their own allies believe something that wasn't true. And if Tucker was willing to deceive others so convincingly, what guarantee did Jack have that he wasn't being deceived as well? Their disagreement lingered unresolved, casting a shadow over everything that followed. And Victor, ever perceptive, wasted no time in exploiting it. Through a series of carefully placed intermediaries, Victor began feeding each man exactly what they feared most. To Jack, he sent subtle, but damning hints that Tucker had been quietly negotiating side deals, positioning himself to take full control of the acquisition once it was secured. To Tucker, he provided equally compelling evidence that Jack had contingency plans in place, plans that would effectively cut Tucker out of the equation the moment Victor was defeated. The brilliance of Victor's strategy lay not in the information itself, but in its plausibility. Neither Jack nor Tucker could definitively prove the claims, but neither could they dismiss them. As a result, their alliance began to unravel in ways that were both subtle and profound. Meetings grew shorter, more transactional. Decisions that once flowed naturally now required lengthy deliberation. And beneath it all, a quiet but persistent question took root in both their minds: who would make the first move? Despite the growing mistrust, the acquisition deal moved forward. Too much was at stake for either man to walk away, and both were determined to see it through, even if it meant outmaneuvering each other in the process. But as the final stages approached, it became clear that this was no longer just a battle against Victor. It was a three-way war, with shifting alliances and hidden agendas at every turn. The moment came during the final round of negotiations, a closed-door meeting where the future of the deal would be decided. Jack arrived first, his mind racing with contingencies, his resolve hardened by weeks of tension and doubt. Tucker entered moments later, his demeanor as composed as ever, giving nothing away. For a brief moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then, almost simultaneously, they both realized the same thing. Victor wasn't just targeting their alliance. He was forcing them to reveal themselves. The negotiation unfolded with a precision that bordered on choreography, each move carefully calculated, each statement layered with meaning. But beneath the surface, a different game was being played, one where every gesture, every hesitation, was scrutinized for signs of betrayal. And then it happened. A clause buried deep within the contract, one that neither Jack nor Tucker had initially flagged, suddenly became the focal point of the discussion. It was subtle, almost innocuous on the surface, but its implications were enormous. Whoever controlled that clause would effectively control